All right. Well, hi, hello, and welcome to Building Cyber Resilient Data Management Architectures. Now, today's awesome webinar is sponsored by Cohesity and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Jess Steinbach. If I haven't met you already, hi, hello. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I am so happy to be here with all of you today because I love this idea of resilience. I think we're past the point in our lives now where we can convince ourselves that the bad things aren't going to happen, whether we're talking about life or humans or, when it comes to our security strategies. Even the best laid plans might have weaknesses, fail points, or just not go the way that we expected, like the Death Star, right? That one tiny little weak point and the whole thing blows up. Now, I'm mentioning this, I'm bringing up Star Wars early on because I can tell you that one of our speakers has a tiny little Star Wars Easter egg hidden in the setup, and I want to see if you can all spot it. So message me when you spot the Easter egg. All right, so my friends, while it is important to think about setting defenses, it is equally important to think about our responses and our recovery. And that is what we're here to talk about today, that resiliency, building our resiliency. And the good news is that we have some awesome experts here with us to help us explore that idea, to get those best practices, those tips, the trends, all the good things that you need to know as you're considering the resiliency of your data landscape while you're protecting your Death Stars. Well, hopefully none of you are on the dark side, but you never know. All right, so I'm going to zip through a few of the important housekeeping points so that we can get into our conversation here today. All right, so we're going to start things out by taking a little tour of your audience console. I want to start at the question section. So if you haven't found that already, to say hi or hello, find that question section right now. The absolute best part of a webinar like the one we're about to engage in is the chance to ask questions directly of our experts. So I'm going to introduce our speakers to you in just a moment, but I can tell you already that they are very excited for an interactive conversation. They want to hear from you. So plan on getting involved. Plan on being part of that conversation. Ask those questions, the comments, shout out your favorite Star Wars reference, whatever you got for us today. We want to hear from you. You can give this a little test run right now by saying hi or hello, give a little greeting, a little wave out there to everyone here with us today. I do want to remind you all that that questions console is going to be a great way to reach out to the Actual Tech Media team if you do have any technical issues during our session today. Knock on wood, of course. And I do want to remind you all that a browser refresh is going to get rid of any of the usual tech gremlins, but if your screen has been taken over by the Empire today and it's not working well for you, wow, I'm really having fun with these. No problem at all. Just shoot us a message in the questions tab and the Actual Tech Media team will be there to help you out. So browser refresh, step one, reaching out to us over that questions tab, step two. All right, skipping along on your audience console here, we're going to check out that handout section. Make sure that you visit that handouts tab. There are lots of great resources for you today, things that you're going to want to take with you to follow up on the conversation that we're going to have. This is just the starting point, right? There's lots more to dig into. So make sure you are clicking on those resources, saving, downloading, holding on to for after we wrap. All right, now it is not just awesome content and fun Star Wars references that we are getting out of our day here together today. We also have a $250 Amazon gift card as a prize drawing at the end of our webinar. Of course, you do need to be here in live attendance during our conversation today in order to qualify for the prize, and all winners must meet Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you are not sure what those terms and conditions are, head back over to that handouts tab that we were just talking about, click in, scroll down, full T's and C's listed for you there. And as a little extra treat on this already awesome day that we're having together, I can also tell you that the Cohesity team has a little extra bonus giveaway that they're going to tell you about a little bit later, so stay tuned for that. Speaking of little additional extra giveaways, we have one more that I need to tell you about. We do have a $50 Amazon gift card going to the best question asked. The best question asked. Now, keep in mind that our team is going to review with the Cohesity team all the questions asked after we wrap up our webinar. So that means that even if your question does not get read out in our live Q&A at the end of the session today, there is still a chance to win. So stay tuned for that. As always, we will reach out to our lucky winner after the event. All right, whew, that was a lot of info very quickly. We have finally come to it. We are ready to jump in and get our wonderful speakers out here with me. I am so pleased to introduce you guys to Jonathan Mayer, Director Security Solutions Architect at Cohesity, and Megan Laflamme, Director of Product Marketing at Cohesity. Let's get our wonderful speakers out here with us. Megan, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us here. We are off to a great start. Can't wait to hear what you have in store for us. I know we've got lots coming our way. So Megan, I'm going to hand things right on over to you. Take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, Jess, for that introduction. First of all, thank you everyone who's joined us today on this session about building cyber resilient data management architectures. So my name is Megan Laflamme. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Cohesity. I've spent several years in cloud automation, solutions, security, and data management. And I'm joined by one of my esteemed colleagues and field engineers, Jonathan Mayer. So Jonathan Mayer leads the Security Solutions Architecture program for Cohesity, and he has over 20 years of experience in the IT industry, involved both offensive and defensive security activities. He has a BS in IT with a focus in computer forensics, and he's also a lock sport hobbyist. So excited to have him here with us today, and this blend of skills is really valuable in bringing customer needs and product capabilities together. So today we're going to be talking a bit about ransomware protection and cyber attack protection from an architect's perspective. So this will be relevant for security and IT practitioners as organizations are thinking about how to expand data protection to withstand, but also minimize disruption from cyber threats and improve that cross-functional collaboration on cybersecurity. And we're going to talk a little bit about the high-level challenges that we face with, the evolving data and cyber threat landscape. And then Jonathan's going to talk through a common ransomware event scenario, and we'll review some of the key capabilities that are needed to defend against these threats, but also to ensure that that topic of resilience is not just about withstanding or stopping these attacks, but ensuring that your data and applications are resilient before, during, and especially after. So Jonathan is going to share our perspective from typically, what our customers value in a cyber defensive and offensive position. And we'll talk a bit about some of the solutions that strengthen our cyber resilience strategies and address that this is not a problem also that one vendor can tackle alone. It takes a village to really secure an environment and become truly cyber resilient. So with that, I'm going to get started. We are, excuse me, there we go. Okay, so, I think we've all seen a challenges slide like this 100 million times in our career. I'm not going to do my best Chewbacca impression to get through this content. I don't want to ruin your day. But ultimately, I do think it's important just to kind of root our conversation in some of the challenges that our customers face, just to give context to the architecture and solutions that we're going to discuss today. And so, with that, first, a key consideration these days with growing demands on IT and security organizations and the proliferation of data apps is how to keep costs under control for data security management. So in addition to the high license fees for some legacy systems and the overhead required to manage these disparate endpoint systems, certainly strains budgets that could otherwise be used towards more growth-oriented investments. And then there's the data. So challenges consolidating and protecting and security that data in really complex and growing in complexity, these data environments. So data silos across the enterprise, both on-prem and in the cloud, inconsistency in how data is stored and managed, and that lack of interoperability between legacy data management systems. And then in the event of an attack, without that consolidated global visibility into backup data and impacts, it further puts the organization at risk and makes them more vulnerable to loss of data that severely impacts business operations. And then, finally, some of these disparate systems, expand attack surfaces, and many point and legacy solutions don't offer the critical security capabilities needed to protect critical backup data, like zero trust security architectures, including RBAC, MFA, and SSO. Immutable snapshots, robust privilege access management, and approval workflows. So with that, before I hand things over to Jonathan, I just wanted to kind of set the stage for when we talk about resilience at organizations, what are we talking about at Cohesity when we say resilience? So first, for us, it really starts with data resilience. So this refers to the ability to protect, preserve, and recover data access in the face of various threats and challenges. So this includes technologies for data backup and redundancy, disaster recovery, and availability. And data resilience really ensures that that data remains intact and accessible, even in the event of hardware failures and data corruption, accidental deletions, or natural disasters. And then building off of that is cyber resilience. And that focuses specifically on an organization's ability to withstand and recover from cyber attacks and security breaches. So this includes measures to prevent, detect, and respond to cyber threats effectively before recovery. And this encompasses things like, cybersecurity practices, incident response plans, employee training. And so we're going to talk about some of the key considerations for differentiating your data resilience strategy from cyber resilience. And then, all of this helps contribute to business resilience. So this is a broader concept that encompasses both data and cyber resilience, but also extends to the org as a whole. So this includes, continuation of essential operations, delivering products and services, adapting to disruptions while minimizing impact on reputation and customers and financial stability. It's ultimately trust between a business and your customers. And so that's one of the things we're going to touch on today across these resilience strategies is the importance of trust. So whether it's a natural disaster or data outage, the first thing you lose access to is services. And in a cyber attack, you lose trust. There's loss of trust in the integrity of the data. That need for cross-functional communication is critical in restoring trust in the data and recovery processes and for the business. So with that, thank you for letting me sort of set the stage and kind of why we're here today, talk a little bit about some of the terms and phrases and what that means to us to set the stage. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Jonathan, who's going to walk through a sample attack flow to kind of illustrate this resilience.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much. Like you said, I think it really helps to frame the conversation around resilience instead of so often. I mean, Cohesity's been guilty of it in the past, where everybody rushes out, especially if you're kind of more operationally minded. We rush out and we talk about recovery. But in the broader context of especially cyber attacks, there's so much that happens before recovery that really makes or breaks how that all comes down. And when we talk about resilience, I think, though this is all about technology and it's about your digital systems. If you look at some of the bigger attacks that have played, I mean, there's been several recently in hotel chains and those kinds of very customer oriented businesses. That business resilience very much revolves around analog systems. Every time you read the news reports, you'll hear or you'll see, everything's being done on paper, right? And so as much as we want to plan for being able to handle things in the digital realm, if you're truly looking at like the deepest level of resilience, you need to have some plans for how you're going to revive analog processes from a business standpoint, because that's kind of there needs to be a stopgap between when the problem begins and you're able to deal with it and allowing the business to, at least at a critical function level, keep sustaining itself. And so as we talk about, and again, Cohesity, one of our big benefits that we bring to the table is that the architecture that we were built from, we're 10 years old now. And when we became a company, it was with this mindset that, at the time it was very focused on just aggregating data, because we understood that if you simplify all of the management components of how data comes together, where it lives, how it grows, how it's moved, replicated, how it's made accessible, that inherently opens up a lot of capabilities, both the things that you know about at the time, and then it sort of paved the road for future uses that are yet to be determined, right? And AI is obviously that's a big point of discussion and topic these days, and because of the way that we put things together and a number of workloads that we can bring together and a centralized management interface, and the way that we can present data back out from that centralized platform, that makes a huge difference in how resilient the architecture can be, and kind of how you're able to navigate these attacks. And so one of the ways that I personally like to talk through this stuff, like Megan said, is kind of walking through a real example, because we understand a lot of times, you'll have both security and operations minded people in these conversations. And so everybody's looking at it from a different perspective, right? I've been in both of those seats, and I get it. On the operations side, it's all about just making sure that the services are available, and that SLAs are being met, and reporting is good, and all of those things. Whereas on the security side, you're really trying to maintain the risk posture, right? So I want to make sure that I understand what threats are out there in the broader world. That's why I'm part of the Cohesity threat intelligence team, because we want to make sure that how we're building our capabilities are delivering the appropriate outcomes, and we're paying attention to how the adversaries are operating, and what makes the biggest impact to our customers in terms of how we enable them. A big part of that is just visibility into the data, and then flexibility with how you're able to make that available. So part of walking through this, if you're from the security mindset, you obviously recognize this is the MITRE attack chain. And then if you're on the operations side, take this as an opportunity to kind of understand how your teammates look at things, because oftentimes what will happen is a security alert will come in, it'll be investigated. There's kind of two modes of operation. One is proactive, one is reactive. And on the proactive side, that alert comes in that maybe it's you see some phishing emails, nobody clicks on it, but they report it. You get to kind of dig around, understand what is there more to this? Did somebody click on it? What does that mean? What's the extent? It could just be a simple, it doesn't have to be malware or wipers. It can just as easily be a standard virus, right? And being a first and foremost a backup and recovery platform, that puts us in sort of a unique situation, right? We have file capabilities, which that's part of what brings the uniqueness, right? Because your critical systems, Active Directory, vSphere, vCenter, all your databases, cloud services, all of those things, like we're backing those things up so that you've got point in time copies, and that's really powerful if you think about it, because when you start looking at how an attack takes place, there's that initial access. Maybe that's a phishing attack. So, people are downloading a link. Maybe, oftentimes you see a lot of examples of Word docs that have malicious macros built into them. And so just being able to search on the Word doc that's being downloaded and find that in the environment, that's global search. That's a thing we've had from the beginning. that's hugely beneficial from an investigation standpoint, to be able to see things exactly where they're going. A lot of these stages, they happen without necessarily leaving files behind. The execution phase, sometimes it's just a process that runs in memory and it gets hidden. At some point, a payload gets pulled down. So now you're starting to leave digital footprints, right? And so every time those footprints are left, if we're taking backups, especially if you think about kind of the length of time that an adversary is in an environment, now you're starting to piece together, like our gift to you is the superpower of time travel, right? So as you start to figure out what's going on in the environment, you can start looking at the state of a system last week, yesterday, 2 days ago. And as you start figuring out how that adversary might be moving through the environment, it allows you to really understand kind of what changes were made where. From an operating system level, there's a lot of options there, but generally speaking, we're going to grab all of the system information, which includes, if you recover that, you can we make it very, very quick and easy to recover systems or to clone systems into an isolated environment for deeper analysis. So if you suspect that maybe somebody created an additional local account on a system or messed around with some configuration settings on a group, you can recover that system, clone it into that isolated environment and take a closer look. And the benefit there is that it's offline. And so if you do have an attacker in the environment watching what's going on, you're not on the live system. And so they don't see what you're doing necessarily, right? And so the dwell time, obviously, for the non-security folks on the line, the dwell time is really from the time an attacker is in the environment until you're able to find them. So it's the hide and seek part of the engagement, right? And once they understand that they're there, two things can happen, really. One is that's their indication that it's time to move to the impact stage, and that's where bad things start happening. If it's a wiper, sometimes they'll try to extract payment through a ransomware attack. Sometimes there have been instances where those get thwarted and the attackers get frustrated, and so they just start destroying things. You're dealing with live people, and that's a big difference. I can remember going through DR processes, exercises in my early career, and security was definitely a thing, but it just wasn't what it is today. And so, it was very much thinking about water pipes breaking or fires or whatever. But, with the advent of cyber attacks, now you've got real issues with, like an active adversary moving in the environment. And so,
hey, Jonathan, do you mind if I interrupt for 1 second? So we were talking earlier, and I know like a common tactic used in attacks is, to either like create a new domain account or to like modify GPOs to propagate malware. And I think you're kind of moving into that impact section, but can you touch on how you can kind of get better visibility into those changes?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that for quite a while now we've actually had a pretty robust Active Directory protection capability. So, we'll back up the domain controllers, and that includes all the FSMA roles and all the metadata. And the beauty there is that when you need to actually, when it comes time to figure out what happened, you do a recovery from a point in time, and we actually compare that recovery with the live Active Directory. So if in that proactive mode, what that does is it allows you to see changes made. So if a GPO has been modified, that's a pretty common tactic in order to distribute ransomware across an environment rapidly, right? Use the existing tool sets. You can find that quickly and revert it. In situations where maybe you've had to rebuild the environment completely, as part of our response team, I've actually sat with customers and they've used that same capability to be able to compare configuration items as they build out a clean environment to make sure that they get everything the way they need it to be up and running smoothly and quickly. So that's a great question. I mean, that ultimately comes down to, and this is also a huge point, is that especially now in this increasingly hybrid world, we've got a lot of environments where maybe they've used traditional Active Directory, but then they're starting to shift into things like Azure AD. That sounds well and good, but when you start looking at kind of this whole attack workflow, that command and control piece is one of the sections that gets sort of underappreciated in the planning exercises, because if you can't figure out where the attack is coming from, oftentimes your only course of action is to cut all ties with the internet in order to stop the control of the adversary. But of course, that you're going to take some losses in that action. So it's something that you've either got to plan for, or you're going to be dealing with just as much challenge as the adversary. So I've had a number of conversations with customers where, they've got Active Directory locally, but then they're, replicating up into Azure AD, and that they haven't really thought through, like, what happens if Azure AD goes away? How do we revert back? How do we go back to that other copy, and what does that look like? And you'll notice the key here is that this is a big difference from, as we're thinking through our capabilities, the defense evasion is an enormous. I mean, generally speaking, if you go to MITRE, the MITRE ATT&CK, pages and start pulling up any particular threat or campaign or software, oftentimes the defense evasion section is going to have far more entries than anything else, because that's what allows the attackers to move around and increase their dwell time, right? And so that's where being able to provide access to the environment, it makes a big difference, and give access to data sets. So often we'll run into situations where maybe there needs to be a deeper analysis done, right? And the primary environment is not trusted. So how do you get that data accessible in an isolated environment if you don't have another NAS, or if you don't have another VM? So being able to clone systems, me being from a forensics background, you take memory images, you take disk images, you do your analysis. Well, where do you put those? Where do you put the image files once you're done? Where do you put your evidence when you're done, so that it can't be tampered with, right? So Cohesity having the capability, the file system capabilities, even if that's not really your focus, being able to put those data sets into the platform, and then having the global dedupe and being able to have the tighter security, because it's not a Windows server, so I'm not having to deal with SMB. I'm not, Eternal Blue doesn't factor in, right, from a vulnerability standpoint. So it helps me simplify my operations, but provides a lot of really useful benefit for me, because I have quick, easy access to that stuff moving into the future. I'm going to pause there for a second, and then we're going to kind of shift out of the MITRE ATT&CK for a second. And, as we talk about capabilities and outcomes, walking in the MITRE ATT&CK stuff, it's very easy as we go through kind of what our capabilities are to then go trace back and look. And as you get better sense of kind of what the capabilities are, you can go back and look at the MITRE ATT&CK and say, oh, well, that makes more sense, because if I know that the malware drops a particular file, then now I know I have better chance to see everywhere it is quickly, right? So kind of tying those things together is really beneficial. But tying it back to these bigger frameworks like NIST is also useful, because so often we walk into conversations and you get a laundry list of Like, well, do you have immutability? Do you have role-based access? Are you zero trust? This is where all that's coming from, right? It gives us a standard vernacular and kind of a framework to have the conversations. And while those capabilities are all well and good, it's really the outcomes that matter the most, right? So, when we talk about the outcome is you touched on at the very beginning, is we're trying to make sure that we have trust in the environments that we're protecting and that we're managing. And so, it's important to know, as you're dealing with an event, what systems can you actually trust? Because you're going to have to rely on these technology stacks to put things back together. And if you can't say with certainty that you trust that system, then you've got to have a quick plan put together on how do you reestablish that trust so that you can use that to further your process of putting things back together. And so, moving kind of through that, I'm not going to read all these slides. You can kind of glance through. The key here is that some of these things are native capabilities, and some of these things we partner within our Data Security Alliance. The reason we worked with to create that Data Security Alliance is this is a really broad set of capabilities and outcomes, and it is impossible for any single vendor to do all of that by themselves. And even if they did, what happens if they have a problem? Now you have no backup. There's no resilience in that stack. And so by having an ecosystem of partners just providing these capabilities, and oftentimes the capabilities that there's a little bit of overlap, because the things that are most important, you need a little bit of overlap to provide that extra level of resilience around the outcomes, right? We'll kind of touch on different aspects of where data is stored and how data flows as we get into the workflows here. So now that you've kind of seen the high levels and stuff like MFA and immutability, just to be really clear, being a forensics guy, when we talk about immutability of backups, it's a little different than forensics, right? Because on the forensics world, we're taking block level images and we're hashing, and that is admissible in court. Immutability from the backup side, obviously, and especially if it's a file system, you have to be able to write data in. But once that data is written, the way the file system works on the backside, it is a write once, read many file system. And so that's really important. Even as those changes go in, those changes are written as new data, and that original data persists as it was. So it's actually really, really cool. I mean, it's the foundation of the company, and so a lot of people don't really appreciate how cool it is, but it enables everything else. Some of those things are the security center, right? So this is when we talk about the visibility, just kind of that high level especially on a proactive stance, is understanding where is my potential risk, right? Where are my configuration weaknesses? There are you have different workflows. You need to understand where sensitive data may be. That can be stuff that's under regulatory compliance, like PII, SOX, those kinds of things, credit card, PCI stuff. Or it can just as easily be credentials, tokens, things that could be used against you. PowerShell history files. That's one of my personal favorites to go after whenever I'm trying to elevate privileges. People fat finger. Somebody might type a password accidentally in their history shell or their shell history, and there it is. If I know where to look, I can use that account now. So having visibility to those kinds of things proactively is really, really powerful, because it helps you understand, do I need to disable this account, change the password, whatever, have some user training, SOC party, whatever. And then kind of moving through, there's the data mobility aspect as well, because you are going to have critical information, your contact lists, some of your critical ISOs. In our own lab, the SANS in their Pickerel model, they have this concept of a jump bag. So golden images, core install files, some of the things you need to kind of kickstart the business to do that recovery. Those things can go out in a vault. Fort Knox is really, really innovative in that way, is that I feel like we really threaded the needle on establishing physical and administrative isolation up in the cloud. It's our cloud, but simplifying the implementation of that. So that's something that's definitely worth checking out. Fort Knox. You can talk to your local account teams as a follow-up. It's really, really impressive. And then kind of moving through, so we're going to kind of step into some of these individual dashboards real quick. So the key here is that from a single interface, I can do role-based access, and I can give my security team visibility into this without necessarily needing to get into all of the backup and recovery and some of the data management workflows. So data can be centralized, information can be centralized, but they can have separate access. And more important, this is all API driven. This is all REST. So we have a lot of connection, a lot of integrations back into different SIEM platforms and SOAR platforms. We continue to add lists to that. Same thing, threat feeds. We've got our own, but we have a lot of capability around including your own threat intelligence to our platform. So at the simplest way, you log in, and we've got a threat feed already there, but we've got a lot of customers that they've already seen a good deal of activity in their environments. And so they will ingest their own threat libraries. And that way, whenever something looks interesting, they can go ahead and pull, they can take a particular point in time and say, I want to check it for these particular threats that we've seen in the past. That's really powerful if you think about it, because generally those are the capabilities that would have to happen on your production environment. So both, they're visible. So if you've got an attacker watching you, they're going to see that. And I just had a conversation last week with somebody that, they've got systems that are really, really delicate, and they can't necessarily afford to put the extra workload on those things to do things like vulnerability scanning and threat scanning. And so being able to do that offline, it really serves two purposes. One, it makes it easily, from a computation standpoint, makes it doable, but then it also gives you that privacy if you are in a scenario where the attackers are watching you and trying to figure out how much you know. And frankly, I mentioned AI earlier. There's so much advancement on the attack side with the AI. There are jailbroken models all over the dark web that are getting exploited heavily. Phishing is kind of the first area that I've seen it really be used aggressively. But the degree of believability on some of these phishing campaigns now, especially from, it's the as a service model, right? So somebody comes up with a really good phishing model using a LLM, and they are shockingly believable. So be really careful. That stuff it's taken off leaps and bounds. And so it's, unfortunately, I'd say the defense side is a little bit slow to adopt because we're trying to do it a little more responsibly. But that's definitely coming fast and furious. So anyway, threat capability. This is also key because when you're in a responsive kind of situation where, let's say, the impact has been known, they either it's a wiper or a ransomware attack. That's hard because systems are down, the pressure's on, And so being able to quickly, I always look at it, if I've got systems already being encrypted and destroyed, especially if I've got a persistent threat, the systems that are still up are way more interesting in that initial moment to me, because if somebody still has a foothold, they're going to be on one of those remaining systems. So being able to do these threat scans against the remaining systems very quickly can really help me figure out, okay, where do I need to focus my energy and time to stop that threat as quickly as possible. Similarly, when we, look, I already mentioned the classification piece. Yes, you're going to need to understand if sensitive data was accessed for the purpose of, notifications, filing. SEC is really all over this one at this point if you're in the States here. But it's also just as important to understand, like, if there's a particular token that pops up in this classification scan. The news of Microsoft just this week, right? It was a dev account or test account that didn't have MFA. Attackers got it, and granted, this is an APT. They're very, very skilled. They got control of that account, and then they used that account to then create more accounts and move up and over. And so being able to see kind of where that exposure is, and if you see an account in here and you know what it has access to, now you know where to focus your attention quicker than maybe something else. And so moving kind of down the road here, Fort Knox. This one gets really interesting because, Fort Knox, all of this is through our cloud management platform, which is Helios, right? That's the control plane. And what's really nice is that Helios ties together all of the capabilities. We've got a lot of customers who are hybrid. So they've got, maybe they've been traditional in data centers, and we have Cohesity clusters. Everything could be managed through Helios. But then as they spin up, whether it's M365 stuff or just cloud native workloads, those can also be protected and managed through our backup as a service or through cloud native clusters. But it's all visible through Helios. It's all reportable through Helios. And depending on, like in the M365 space, and if you're using our backup as a service, so we'll actually protect your data, but then we'll back it up into our cloud. So again, you've got that sort of administrative and geographic separation. So that's a huge capability that's really allowed companies to make tricky pivots from on-prem to cloud first, or if they just were born in the cloud. You get the same user experience, and we've got a lot of customers that appreciate us because of how flexible we are and that we allow them to be in that kind of multimodal operation. Fort Knox, again, as I mentioned earlier, that's really key in being able to take your most sensitive information, your most critical workloads, and have those in a vault. The keys rotate. It's essentially it connects, it archives up into the vault, and then once that archive's complete, it tears down the keys. So there is no persistent connection, and that's kind of the magic behind it. Is that yes, it's a cloud offering, but it's in our tenant, and it's data locked. So again, it's the write once, read many, but it provides a complete isolation. I know Megan mentioned at the very beginning, multi-person rule, we call it quorum, but essentially you've got workflows that, like the Fort Knox archiving, where if you need to recover something out of there, it's going to require multiple people from within the organization to sign off on that in order to initiate that workflow. So, if you think about account compromise, phishing attacks, those kinds of things, it's a very significant step up on what the attacker would have to accomplish in order to compromise that data. Which kind of brings it back to, we talk about DataHawk as, that's sort of the licensing bundle for the whole thing that includes all of these capabilities, right? So, we've got the vaulting for the isolation, the threat intelligence for the visibility on kind of the proactive, although it very much comes in handy on the reactive side, and then that intelligent classification. Now, I want to be super clear here. At the beginning, we were talking about how, sometimes worst case scenario is you have to cut yourself off from the internet, which means Helios is not part of the mix. And so you lose some of these capabilities. That's going to be the case, whatever vendor you're dealing with, right? Because that's the trick, is that we can do really amazing things and we use the cloud, and that's awesome. But when things get, plan for the worst, and everything else is easier, because when you have to disconnect in order to contain the threat, you still need some strong capabilities. And that's really where Cohesity shines, because those on-prem clusters, if you plan a little ahead, you can actually have what we call multi-cluster managers. So it's a watered down version of Helios. So you still get that somewhat, it's still global visibility, but you just don't get the DataHawk components. But more important, you can recover all of the work, all the workloads. Specifically, we've run into a lot of situations where that forensic capability is pretty powerful, where the customers, there's data in a, maybe it's a big NAS, maybe it's their install media, and it's not even that significant. It's only a couple hundred gigs. But if you don't trust the system that you're trying to put back together, like Active Directory, maybe you got to rebuild it. What media do you use to rebuild your Active Directory if you've got nothing, right? And so being able to use that little jump bag to get your footing underneath you so that you can start building things back up, that can be the difference between you're down for a month or you're down for a couple days.
Right. That was excellent, Jonathan. I think is in a kind of related question, great questions coming in from the audience here. I've been going through and answering some as I can, but I think related to, your point about, for example, losing that internet access. Could you talk a little bit about how Cohesity can, has helped customers in the event of an attack? How would you describe sort of roles and responsibilities? Is Cohesity helping to operate the systems during an attack?
So I would say we're kind of the ultimate utility player in a response. It kind of goes back to planning for the worst, right? Because ideally, you've got your SIEM, you've got your SOAR, you've got all your your security tooling in place, and so the teams, they are the quarterback, they are kind of the front line, and that's where at the very beginning, oftentimes in most scenarios, as an operations guy, you would see kind of random requests for hey, restore this system, restore that system. Can you pull these logs from this day? Or, they don't necessarily make sense out of context. And it's kind of all right, these guys are sort of annoying me today because they're really needy. Turns out it's like the whole duck thing, right? The duck's paddling feverishly, but it looks super calm on top. So, that on the security side, they're chasing somebody down. I always say that a cyber response is really like DR with a game of hide and seek and tag before you get to the DR part, because you got to figure out what's going on, right? And so that's where our utility becomes really powerful, because we can both search through the data and we can make more kinds of data available in an isolated environment quickly. And even if you're in that operation, in that mode where you're disconnected from the internet, we can do that at scale, or at whatever scale is needed. And I get it. If you're still trying to hunt down the adversary, you don't necessarily want to put 100 VMs back in production. But once you figure out kind of how to deal with that, technology should never be the thing that slows you down, right? And so we want to be able to enable you to move at whatever speed you need to for where you are in that process.
Super helpful. So I think we've got just a few minutes left, and I just want to leave a couple of minutes for closing out. But there came in a question from a gentleman named Vinod around, I think you started to touch on this, like covering how the solution protects against cyber attacks and Active Directory and domain controllers. I know that you recently shared a really comprehensive story around this with me. And so if it's all right with you, I'd welcome the chance for us to connect with Vinod and doing a deeper dive on that.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I mean, I was just going to say, the short of it is we're backing up the Active Directory. So we're not preventing an attack on Active Directory, but once manipulation has happened, we help you identify what has changed, and we can go from there.
Excellent. All right. I think with that, with just a couple minutes left, I'm just going to close out a couple of thoughts, and then I'll hand things over to Jess. First, again, thank you everyone for the high engagement today, and Jonathan for this excellent content. I really appreciated your experience and expertise in kind of delivering this overview. And I encourage folks to check out our website. If you go to cohesity.com demo/interactive, you can actually get a sort of step-by-step walkthrough of some of the capabilities that Jonathan spoke to today. And from there, we love the chance to connect you with the team and see these demos live and talk about some of the different integration points, to help build that really robust cyber resilient architecture. All right. And then the last point from me is I just want to thank our attendees and note that we do have an additional prize where we're going to select 75 attendees who joined for the full session. And we will be sharing with you
Oh, we lost Megan's. Hang on. I gotta unmute her. We lost her sound. But stay tuned for more details on a cool giveaway. You've got a complimentary kit to secure your personal data. Megan, I gotta know more. Tell us more.
Sorry about that. Okay. Excellent. So we will be sharing these with the first 75 folks. So look forward to connecting with you further from here.
Lorenzo says, talk about a cliffhanger. I agree. That was intense, Megan. We will be giving away.
Oh my goodness.
What a great webinar this has been. There's suspense, there's magic of cinema. We got all the things. Jonathan, your Easter egg was spotted almost immediately. I did say this in response to somebody, but you made that Scout Trooper mask. That's so impressive.
Yep, it's 3D printed. So that is a
Yes, if you missed it, Jonathan just pointed out the Easter egg, and awesome. Jonathan, our next webinar, I keep telling you, is just going through all the cool toys in your shop, and that everyone stay tuned for that. And I think we got some suggestions to hide Easter eggs in the slides, so we got all kinds of fun things for future Cohesity webinars. So everyone out there, keep your eye out for Cohesity webinars, and make sure you come back and join us. And we are getting a lot of high fives from the audience. In fact, Jennifer says already a customer, loves Cohesity. Love seeing that. That's an awesome shout out, Jennifer. And so for all of you out there, again, a quick recap of some of these key important points. You're just by attending today and being here with us throughout the day, you're entered to win. Cohesity is going to follow up with the 75 winners of this complimentary kit to secure your personal data. So make sure that you've got that. or be checking your emails for that, I should say. And then we'll also be following up with the best question asked. And again, that's a $50 Amazon gift card for the best question asked. And the competition is fierce today. We got some great questions. Thank you to everyone for getting those in. Megan and Jonathan, before I let you go, though, I want to ask you sort of two things. Megan, I'm going to ask you to recap what you would suggest as a next step in terms of jumping in with Cohesity and getting started. And Jonathan, I'll start with you, Jonathan. Maybe not necessarily specific to, visiting a website kind of a thing, because I'm gonna ask Megan to give us that. But just sort of as a final, if you had one thing you want everyone in this webinar to walk away understanding, knowing, being ready to take action on, what would you want that one thing to be?
I would say the market is very, very crowded with a lot of the same kind of, you can almost call it bingo, right? Immutability, zero trust, recovery, like all the cloud first APIs, all those things. So take all that with a grain of salt. Really really put your mind around the resilience aspect, which is a lot of the proactive aspects. But as you're evaluating tools and processes, even if it doesn't involve backups, really think through those worst case scenarios and challenge everybody and say, if the power is turned off, now what? If my data center is full of water, then what? If I have to turn my, don't be afraid to paint really dismal pictures, because if you can get decent answers there, everything else is easy.
I like that. Plan for the dark side, hope for the light side, but be ready either way.
Right.
That's it. Jonathan, thank you so much for that. Megan, give us a starting step to jumping in with Cohesity. What would we do? Oh, hang on. We lost you again. Nope, you're back. Go.
Thank you. All right. We would love to connect with you to sort of understand, what your data landscape looks like today and what you're doing to protect data, whether it's on-prem, in a private cloud, or, your SaaS applications. And we can talk through with you sort of our data management and security maturity model, and sort of where organizations typically start with data protection with us, advancing through a lot of these cyber resilience strategies, and reach out to our team to understand some of the best practices that Jonathan walked through here, and some of the technologies that we offer and integrations with leading data security vendors to support that resilient architecture.
And there's some great takeaways also as an excellent follow-up to the conversation we just had in the handouts tabs. If you haven't already gotten that, cyber resilience in the ransomware era, the state of data security and management in 2023, and best practices in cybersecurity and cyber resilience. So lots of great takeaways to kind of dig in a little further, because obviously this is just step one, right, Jonathan? We're scratching the surface, and there's so much more to learn. You've given us a lot to think about. I also forgot to mention, Jonathan, I think one of my favorite comments from today was when your pup was chiming in. One of the audience members said, "Oh, that's an early alert system. That's the new ransomware alert system." you got to train your dog for security, ransomware, cybersecurity. That's the next step.
Cyberdog.
Exactly.
Cyberdog. Perfect.
Cyberdog.
Oh my gosh. Well,
all right. And then if you couldn't hear me before, we'll reach out about look for an email from us about this giveaway for a data blocker in the RFID protection wallet. So highly relevant to our discussion today.
Fantastic. There always has to be something small that happens on any live webinar, right? So Megan, thank you for taking one for the team on that one. All right. Well, thanks for a great time. I've had a blast talking with you both. I cannot wait to have you guys back. I can't wait to see more from the shop of Jonathan, and we'll chat more about cybersecurity. Thanks, team.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank you.
All right, and to all of you out there who are asking some great questions, and I'm seeing a ton of high fives and just good energy coming in from everyone out there in the audience today. Good work spotting. We had a couple people who spotted that Easter egg right away. Nice work. That's awesome. You guys are clearly paying attention, alive, alert, and enthusiastic out there. Speaking of which, how about we do a little bit of a prize giveaway? So again, we've got a $250 Amazon gift card going to a lucky audience member here with us today, present and live at the webinar. And that lucky human is Oliver Rebolito. Sorry, that was written weirdly on my screen here. Oliver Rebolito from California. Congratulations to you, Oliver. Now, as always, we will be in touch about claiming your $250 Amazon gift card after we wrap, and stay tuned for that special giveaway from Cohesity as well as that Best Question Asked gift card that we've got coming at you. And just an awesome conversation today. I had so much fun with all of you, which of course brings me around to my final thought, which is always thank you. So with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to start out by thanking Cohesity, and especially to Megan and Jonathan for such an interesting conversation. I love when we get to have a little bit of fun with our speakers, when we get to see what they're excited about, when they're interested in. And Jonathan really took us on quite a journey today. There was a lot of interesting trends that we walked through. We got to get some tips and some kind of takeaways. It's really great to talk about the state of the union, I guess. I mean, it's really exciting to kind of start to see where, what tools are going to help you navigate that. So a really interesting conversation today, and I hope that your brains are as lit up and excited as mine is. I'm going to go read those PDFs over again, because I think, as I said, we get all of this insight and information in these webinars, and that's just step one. So the next step is doing a little bit more research on your own and digging into Cohesity a bit further and finding out if that's going to be the right solution for you. And I think we've got a lot of great places to start that conversation in our webinar today. So on that note, my biggest high five, as you know, always goes to all of you out there for attending, for taking time out of your day to come and learn, to participate in this conversation, for asking some great questions. I absolutely love this opportunity to sit down with all of you and share what we're thinking about, what's going on in our lives, our organizations, what is important. And when we're talking about resiliency, it can seem like we're thinking about the negative. And Jonathan brought this up a few times, right? It seems like we're sort of assuming failure. And in a way, yes, but we're bringing it back to that positive. We're bringing it away from that scary point, because we're saying, okay, so when the worst happens and when we absolutely need that safety point, something has gone horribly wrong, or we didn't account for something that was unexpected, well, then we have resiliency. So that resiliency is what's going to allow you to sleep at night. As much as we'd all love to believe that everything is impregnable, it isn't, and the unexpected happens. So resiliency is what gives you that peace of mind. As organizations, as teams, and hey, as humans, right? We could all use a little more resiliency in our lives. So I hope that that's how you're leaving our conversation today, is feeling that sense of excitement about that resiliency, about that peace of mind. And I can't wait to have a conversation with all of you again soon. Until that, I'm going to leave it off here. Lorenzo says Jess really likes the hex tiles. I do like the hex tiles. Thank you so much, Lorenzo. And I see lots of thank yous and high fives coming in from the team. Everyone, bring the positivity to our next webinar. I'll see you then. And until then, have an absolutely wonderful end to your day.